Hey everyone, it's me, Matt. Welcome back to my channel. As always, I hope you're all doing great, and I hope you're ready to garden with me today because in today's video, we're going to do some transplanting and cutback of the perennials in my front yard garden. So let's get started. So spinning you around, you can see we're in my front yard garden, and I've been patiently waiting for my average last frost date to pass so I can get into these garden beds and do some perennial cleanup. As a reminder, I live in Central Florida, growing zone 10A, and my average last frost date was January 30th. So it's really important that you wait until your average last frost date is passed before you cut back your perennials. The three main reasons are that the dead plant material provides a natural layer of insulation, protecting the plant's crown and roots from freezing temperatures. The older dead plant material also provides shelter and food for beneficial insects and small wildlife during the winter months. And the last reason is related to new growth protection. When you cut back your plants, it stimulates new growth, and if you do it too soon, the tender shoots are more vulnerable to cold weather, which can damage and set back the plant's development. So talking you through today's work, I'm going to start here with my milkweed plant. You can see it's really leggy. I actually just had a bunch of monarch caterpillars all over this plant a few weeks ago. They stripped it clean, getting their fill before transforming into butterflies. You can actually see one of the old chrysalises here on this dead tropical sage branch. So I've decided I'm going to cut back and move this plant into my native wildflower garden in my side yard. Although this plant is really popular with the monarch butterflies, it goes through phases throughout the year where it looks like this, and I'd rather allocate this space to something that's prettier and has a fuller growth habit. So let me show you what I'm going to transplant here instead. So coming over to the far left side of my front garden, I've got this dwarf purple butterfly bush. It doesn't look like much at the moment because it's currently dormant for the winter months, but it's always sort of struggled in this location. I think part of the issue is it doesn't get enough afternoon sun. In the late spring and summer, it's shaded by the tropical sage plants to the right of it. So I figured I'd cut it back and move it to where the milkweed is. It'll get way more direct afternoon sun and hopefully perform a lot better in that area. So if you live in Central Florida, right now is actually a great time to cut back and transplant your butterfly bushes. You want to cut them back just as the new growth starts to emerge. You can see down here toward the base of this plant, it's got a lot of new growth starting on the old wood. So the plan for today is to cut this back to about 6 inches above the ground. This will encourage vigorous new growth and tons of flowering in the upcoming season. Looking directly behind my butterfly bush, you can see my blue porterweed looking good. I figured with the removal of the butterfly bush, I could transplant the porterweed so it's more front and center, pulling it a little farther away from the Hawaiian tea plants behind it. And then while I'm over here cleaning up this garden bed, I'm also going to cut back my 3 white lantana plants toward the front. You can see they've started pushing some new growth down toward their bases, so I'm going to get in there and cut back all the older, more spindly top growth. So let's jump in there and get these first few projects completed, and then I'll talk you through all the other areas of my front garden we're going to address today. So there we go, those first few projects are completed. I'm happy I was able to move my milkweed plant into my native wildflower garden area. And I'm really happy about moving my butterfly bush into this location. The purple flowers on this plant are going to look so great in this spot as this plant puts on more size this season. I really think this is a much better location for it. It'll get way more direct sunlight and plenty of airflow around it, allowing it to thrive. Looking over here, I'm also really happy with how this turned out too. Pulling the blue porterweed away from the Hawaiian tea plants was definitely a good move. This plant really fills in this space a lot better than the butterfly bush, and I think this placement adds a little more balance to this area. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to monitor all the plants I just transplanted, making sure they all get regular water as they settle into their new homes. The blue porterweed and butterfly bush are set up on my drip irrigation system, so they should be just fine, but these milkweed plants will need to be hand watered. It'll be really important to make sure all the root balls are kept consistently moist but not waterlogged. This will help the plants recover from any transplant shock and it will encourage new root growth. You can also add a layer of mulch around your newly transplanted plants to help the soil retain moisture. And then really quick, before we move on to the rest of today's projects, I wanted to show you my white lantana plants. They've all been cut back, they're all set for spring, and in no time they're going to push a ton of new growth and fill in these spaces with beautiful buttery white blooms. So now let me talk you through the rest of today's perennial cutback projects. We're going to start with my pink paintus plants. There's a lot of new growth at their bases, so I'm going to get in there and remove all their older top growth. Next, I'm going to address my tropical sage plants on either side of my Adirondack chairs. You can see there's a ton of dead branches that need to come out, but I'll definitely be careful not to remove any of the new shoots that started growing from their root balls. After the tropical sages, I'm going to cut back my forked blue curl plants on the right side of this mulch pathway. Then I'm going to cut back my dwarf white paintus and my birdbath garden bed area. I'm also going to cut back all the older dead growth on my white Gara plants toward the back of my front porch seasonal flower bed, and then I'm also going to dig up and remove this one here because it died. Eventually, everything in this front porch seasonal flower bed will be transplanted into other areas of my garden. For the most part, the white Gara and dark blue and light blue Scaevola fan flowers overwintered really well, and I figured I'd find them new homes in my front and back landscapes, but that'll definitely be a project for another day. And then lastly, I'm going to clean up all the older dead growth on the lyre-leaf sages in this garden bed. You can see there's a ton of bloom stalks and seed pods on these plants that need to be removed. So let's get in there now and wrap up all my front garden perennial cutback. All right, we're all done with the perennial cutback. Removing all that older top growth really cleaned up my front flower beds. I know perennial cleanup isn't the most satisfying garden project to watch, but it's definitely a necessary one. My front garden is all cleaned up, and all my plants can now focus 100% of their energy on pushing new growth and blooms for the spring season. So I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me today while I completed these gardening projects. If you haven't already done so, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons so you can hang out with me in future videos. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.